This episode is for the women who smile in family photos, answer emails late at night, and check every box on life's list, yet still feel a quiet emptiness inside. You are not broken, you are not ungrateful, you are human, and you are not alone. Sometimes the most painful sorrow is the one you're not allowed to feel because from the outside, your life looks beautiful. Sometimes the most painful sorrow is the one you're not allowed to feel, because from the outside, your life looks beautiful. People see the house with the white shutters and trimmed hedges. They see the smiling photos at birthdays and anniversaries, the job title in the email signature, the well-fed children who go to school in clean clothes. They see her and they nod approvingly. She's doing well. It becomes a kind of armor, that impression. A shield of competency, of accomplishment. A portrait painted in broad strokes. Marriage, motherhood, career, community. She's in control. She's made it. And because that's what they see, that's what she must be. So she plays the part well. She says all the right things in PTA meetings. She bakes the cupcakes, she volunteers, she answers work emails at night. She checks her calendar before bed and wakes up before the sun, already rehearsing the lines of her day in her head. She's good at this life, that's the truth. She's good at keeping everything in motion. People rely on her at work, at home, everywhere in between. There's a certain pride in that, a strange satisfaction in being the one others can count on. But also there's this other thing. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It slips in through the spaces between tasks, the pauses between responsibilities. It lingers in the hallway after the dishwasher hums to a stop. It brushes against her in the quiet of the laundry room where no one really looks. It's not sadness exactly, not in the way people understand it. It's more like an ache, not sharp, not dramatic, just steady. It's the kind of ache that doesn't interrupt her day. It waits, it watches, it leans against the wall while she packs lunchboxes and answers calls and smiles at dinner. It's the ache of something unfelt, something unseen, but she doesn't speak of it. How could she? She has everything, or at least she has everything she's supposed to want. And when people tell her that, when they remind her how lucky she is, how blessed, how fortunate, she nods. She agrees, because it's true in its own way. She has a home, a family, a nameplate on an office door, a Christmas card that makes people say, "Wow, they're doing great." It would feel almost offensive to say otherwise, to admit something is missing, and maybe she doesn't even know what's missing. It's not a thing she can name. It's not a car or a house or a vacation. It's not a person or a promotion. It's something quieter, something beneath, a part of her she set down a long time ago and never quite picked up again. She sometimes thinks about the woman she was at 22, the one who wore her hair messy on purpose and stayed up late sketching ideas in a notebook, the one who thought of passion as a compass and didn't know yet how much of herself would be given away in small, almost invisible trades, a choice here, a compromise there. That woman didn't plan for this life, not exactly. But she would have admired it probably, maybe even envied it. But the woman now, this woman sometimes looks around and wonders, is this what it was all for? That thought never stays long. It's not allowed to. It's chased away by practicalities and gratitude and the heavy hand of guilt. But it comes back just often enough to leave fingerprints, so she tucks it away again. She smiles when people compliment her kids. She thanks them when they say her marriage is inspiring. She sends birthday cards. She buys the right hand soap. She remembers appointments, checks in on neighbors, does everything the way someone with it all together is supposed to. And she tells herself this is what fulfillment feels like. This is what happiness looks like at 46. But sometimes, only sometimes, she closes the pantry door and leans her forehead against the cool frame for just a moment longer than necessary. And in that moment, she hears something faint. Not words, not quite, just a quiet echo, a sound that might be a question or a memory or both. But she doesn't listen long. There's dinner to finish, homework to check, a meeting tomorrow. The house is quiet again. The ache retreats to its usual place, and she returns to the rhythm of her well-lived, well-loved, beautifully polished life, because everyone says she's doing well, and for now, that will have to be enough. The ache waits for her. It's patient. It doesn't knock or demand. It doesn't interrupt the day or ruin the evening. It understands the rhythm of her life when she's busiest, when she's most surrounded, when she's smiling for others, and it never intrudes. It knows to arrive only when the house falls quiet. It might be late evening when the last light in the hallway clicks off, and she's alone in the bathroom brushing her teeth. It might show up while she's folding towels, clean, warm, orderly, stacking them into their rightful place one after another. It might slip in while she's driving alone from one responsibility to the next, the silence of the car suddenly louder than the hum of the engine. It doesn't look like sorrow. It doesn't even feel like sadness, not at first. It's more like something unspoken stretching itself out inside her, taking up just enough room to be noticed, but not enough to be named. She sometimes wonders if other women feel it too. She watches them at school, drop off, or in the grocery store, or at the staff meeting. The small nods, the practiced laughter, the way they carry bags and clipboards and worries with the same hand, the way their eyes seem bright but distant. She wonders if any of them ever stand in the middle of their own kitchen, surrounded by all the signs of a good life, and feel a sudden emptiness that doesn't make sense. Because she has nothing to point to, no crisis, no fight, no tragic event. Everything is fine, and that might be the hardest part. When things are fine, there's nowhere to place the ache. When things are fine, it feels indulgent to feel unsettled. There's a kind of grief that doesn't come from loss, but from the quiet realization that parts of you were never truly known. Not by others, and not even by yourself. She remembers being younger and thinking that one day everything would fall into place. That if she worked hard, chose well-loved deeply, she would arrive at a life of ease, a life of rightness, and she has all of that on the surface. But ease doesn't always come with stability, and rightness doesn't always come with wholeness. She has built something beautiful. She knows this, and she is proud of it. But somewhere along the way, she stopped asking what she wanted from her own story. Somewhere along the way, she became a caretaker of everyone else's needs, even the unspoken ones. She became the keeper of calm, the smoother of conflict, the planner, the filler of gaps. And slowly, so slowly, she stopped asking herself the small, necessary questions. What makes me feel alive? What makes me lose track of time? What makes me laugh from my belly, not just my throat? It's not that she's forgotten joy. It still happens unexpected and welcome. A good meal, a quiet walk, her child's head on her shoulder heavy with sleep. But she notices that when those moments pass, they dissolve too quickly. Like sunlight across a wall that fades before she can turn and truly see it. And then the ache returns soft and still. It does not blame her, it does not accuse. It simply waits to be acknowledged. Sometimes she wonders if maybe this is just how middle life feels. Like standing in the middle of a bridge, looking back at where she came from, full of dreams and choices and paths, and ahead to where things settle, quiet down slow. And yet she doesn't feel settled. She feels paused, as if there's a conversation she hasn't had with herself in years. A conversation that might begin with the words, "Are you okay?" But she doesn't ask it, because if she did, she's not sure she'd know what to say. She has become so fluent in caring for others that the language of self has grown foreign. Still, every so often, when the night is long and no one is waiting for her voice or her answers or her help, she hears a faint sound like someone knocking on a door she doesn't remember closing. It's not dramatic, it's not urgent, it's just there. A part of her reaching through the blur of years, asking quietly to be known. And in those moments, brief, silent, and always unfinished, she turns toward the sound, but only for a second. Then the laundry beeps, a child calls from upstairs. Her phone lights up, life resumes, and the ache returns to its place, quiet, polite, familiar. She smooths her hands over the counter, checks tomorrow's calendar, and reminds herself of all she has. Because from the outside, she has it all. And inside is harder to explain. There are certain thoughts she doesn't allow to form fully. They begin in the half-quiet of early morning or in the hour between dinner and bedtime when the house is still humming with the tasks of living. These thoughts drift in fragile as steam and just as quickly are waved away. It feels dangerous to name them, not because they're harmful, but because they might be true. They begin with a question, "Is this it?" And quickly, as if overheard by the wrong audience, another voice responds, "How could you ask that? Look at your life." So she closes the door on the thought and returns to something she can touch, a list, a chore, a conversation about what time soccer practice ends. But that question doesn't disappear. It just waits until she forgets she asked it. Some mornings, while pouring coffee or brushing her teeth, she catches a flicker of it in the mirror, not in her face, but in her eyes. Something unspoken, something unsettled. There's a particular guilt that comes from wanting more when you already have what others call everything. It's not loud, it's not selfish, it's quieter than that. It lives in the pauses between gratitude. It stirs not because she's unhappy, but because she once imagined something else. Not a better life, not even a different one, just something fuller, something deeper, something less shaped by the needs of others and more by the sound of her own voice. But over the years, that voice became a whisper, not because anyone told her to quiet down, but because life moved forward and she followed. She did what made sense, what was kind, what was needed. She built a family, she said yes, she adjusted. She poured herself into every container handed to her until the shape of her life no longer belonged to her alone. And it's not that she resents it, that's too simple a word. She loves what she's made, loves who she's made it with. But love does not cancel longing. Love is not the opposite of wanting. Sometimes they sit side by side, arms around each other, like old friends who no longer speak the same language, but still know the shape of each other's hearts. She remembers a moment once years ago, sitting alone on the edge of her bed while the house was still asleep. A memory sharp with no particular reason. She had just finished folding a stack of small clothes, and in the dim light of early morning she had the sudden sense that she had not chosen any of this, that life had chosen her, and she had said yes again and again without pausing long enough to ask herself if the yes was hers. She had brushed the thought away then with the ease of someone practiced in gratitude. But it returned later that day and the day after, never staying long, never leaving completely. She sometimes wonders what her life might look like if she had chosen differently, not because she's dissatisfied, but because she's curious. Not out of regret, but because imagining is a kind of freedom she rarely lets herself have. Would she have traveled more? Would she have stayed in that city she loved for no reason other than it felt like hers? Would she have taken the job that felt risky or walked away from the one that didn't? She doesn't know, and maybe it doesn't matter. What matters is that there is a room in her heart where these questions live. A room she rarely enters but never locks. A room full of alternate versions of herself, not better, not worse, just different. Women she might have been, lives she might have lived. Sometimes she sits in that room quietly without judgment. Not long, just long enough to know it's still there. And then she returns to the hallway of her actual life. The life filled with sounds and people and movement and love, and she closes the door gently behind her, but she feels the weight of the doorknob in her hand long after she lets it go. These thoughts never come with bitterness. They come with silence. They come with honesty. They come with a kind of tenderness that has no place in dinner conversations or casual coffee meetups. Because how do you say it? How do you say, I love my life, and I also ache for pieces of myself I left behind along the way? You don't. You smile, you show up, you finish the grocery list, you plan the weekend, you put on the right coat for the weather, and somewhere inside, beneath the sound of your own voice and the echoes of your name called by others, you carry a quiet truth that wanting more doesn't mean you failed to appreciate what you have. It just means you're still alive, still reaching, still listening for a version of yourself who might still be waiting to be heard. And even if the world never hears her, you do. In the quiet, in the stillness, in the space between what is and what could have been. She once thought that clarity would arrive with a kind of fanfare, a moment of thunder, an unmistakable shift, something cinematic that tears in the mirror, a dramatic epiphany, a decision to change everything. But instead it came as a whisper, a quiet morning, a small pause, a thought she didn't push away. She had been sitting in her car, parked just outside the pharmacy, a list in her hand, a grocery run ahead of her. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a breath between one obligation and the next. And for some reason, she still doesn't know why she didn't turn the key right away. She sat still. And in that stillness, something loosened. Not much, not even enough to name, but something softened, something gave. And without planning to, she allowed the thought to rise fully, but this time unshielded. I want more. Not in a greedy way, not in a way that negated her gratitude. Simply more of herself. More quiet, more wonder, more space that didn't require performance. She didn't say it aloud. She didn't need to. The truth of it filled the cabin of the car like breath. No judgment, no shame, just presence. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't argue with it. It's strange how much of life can be lived on autopilot. How easy it is to fall into rhythm, to move from task to task, to fill time with usefulness. And how easily a woman can disappear behind everything she holds together. But something about that moment, the ordinariness of it, reminded her that change doesn't always come with drama. Sometimes it begins quietly, in a car, on a listless Tuesday, with no one else around. She went inside, bought the things she needed, drove home. She made dinner, answered texts, folded towels. Life went on untouched, but something inside her did not return to how it was. That night, she stayed up later than usual, not because she had to, just because she didn't want to miss herself. She sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea, the house finally asleep. She didn't read, didn't scroll, she just sat. Let the silence settle around her like a second skin. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was close. And in that space, she tried something she hadn't done in years. She asked herself what she wanted, not what needed to be done, not what was expected, not what would keep the peace, but what she wanted as a woman, as a person, as a self. At first, the answer didn't come. It was like calling to someone who hadn't heard her voice in years. But she waited, and eventually a small answer arrived. Time. Not time to finish chores, not time to be efficient, just time that belonged only to her. Time without a job attached to it, without a label, without needing to explain. The next day, she canceled something she didn't want to attend. She told no one, made no excuse. She simply opened up an hour, then did nothing with it. Or rather, she did everything with it. She walked slowly. She stood in the sun. She remembered a melody from her 20s and hummed it under her breath. She didn't think about who she should be. She just was. She'd forgotten what that felt like. And even though the ache remained, it always would, there was something new beside it now. A softness, a gentleness she extended inward. She stopped demanding that she be grateful every second of the day. She stopped translating her longing into guilt. She stopped editing herself down to be more palatable to others. She allowed complexity, allowed contradiction, allowed herself to hold both joy and grief in the same hand without needing to explain or resolve it. And in doing so, she began to see herself not as someone lost or broken, but as someone in process, someone who had given much and now deserved to give back to herself. It was not a reinvention. It was a returning to the quiet girl who once filled notebooks with ideas, the one who used to get goosebumps from poems, the one who lingered at windows watching leaves fall like secrets. She was still there, buried under years of usefulness, and now she was being invited back. No fanfare, no proclamation, just a woman in a kitchen at midnight whispering to herself, "You're still here, I see you." And for now, that was enough. The ache hasn't disappeared. It still arrives sometimes uninvited, but no longer unrecognized. It no longer startles her, no longer makes her feel like something must be wrong. Now it feels more like a visitor she's come to understand. A part of herself, not an intruder. She doesn't fight it. She doesn't try to fix it. Instead, when it comes, she simply nods, as one might to an old friend who sits beside them without needing to speak. There's a strange kind of peace that comes from stopping the war inside yourself, when you no longer demand that longing vanish, when you no longer punish yourself for wanting, when you stop trying to translate your life into a single sentence that everyone else can understand. It didn't happen all at once. There was no announcement, no transformation captured in a before and after. Just a series of small permissions she gave herself, like quiet keys turning in invisible locks. The permission to rest, the permission to want, the permission to mourn, the permission to not explain any of it. She began to notice the way her shoulders softened when she no longer needed to pretend she was fine all the time. How her laughter became fuller, not louder, just less edited. How time stretched differently when she did something simply because she enjoyed it, not because it served a purpose. She learned to sit in her own presence without feeling the need to be productive. She learned that fulfillment doesn't always look like joy. Sometimes it just looks like being able to breathe. She didn't change her life in the way that stories often promise. No dramatic reinvention, no cross-country move, no radical awakening. Her days still look similar. The grocery lists, the family dinners, the emails, the schedules. But something within the framework shifted. She now lives with herself, not around herself. She started writing again. Not every day, not in a blog, not for anyone else. Just scribbled lines in a notebook that no one sees but her. Sometimes the words make sense, sometimes they don't. But it's not about sense, it's about space, about giving her own voice a place to live outside of her head. She started saying no to things that drained her. Not loudly, not rudely, just quietly and without guilt. She started looking at herself in the mirror, not to judge or critique, but to witness. To remind herself that she exists even when she's not being useful. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to feel whole, not because everything was resolved, but because she stopped demanding resolution in order to feel worthy. That's the part no one tells you. You don't have to heal to be lovable. You don't have to be fearless to be enough. You don't have to be content every moment to be allowed to want more. These are the truths she carries now, not as declarations but as quiet companions. She still has days when she forgets, when she slips back into patterns of performance, of quieting her own voice to make others more comfortable. But she notices it sooner now, and when she notices, she returns not in shame, but in gentleness. She has learned to live in her life, not just hold it together, and that has made all the difference. Now when she walks through her house, she notices things she used to overlook. The way the morning light hits the kitchen tile, the sound of her child humming to themselves in the other room, the way her own breath rises and falls in moments of quiet. She is not in a rush to move through these things. She lets them be. She lets herself be. She still carries the ache, but now it rides alongside a quiet pride, not the kind others give you, but the kind you earn by facing yourself without flinching. And sometimes when no one is watching, she places a hand over her chest and whispers to no one but herself, "I did not disappear. I'm still here, and I'm listening now." There is no applause for that, no medals, no social posts. But she no longer needs them, because some victories aren't seen. Some are simply lived, in the silence, in the returning, in the gentle, sacred knowing that she no longer has to prove her worth to belong to her own life. That is enough. That is everything. Thank you for sitting with me in this quiet space today. If any part of this story felt familiar, if it reminded you of something you've carried silently, or maybe helped you name something you've never said out loud, know this: you are not alone. Your life in all its complexity is worthy of being seen. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to be both grateful and still searching. And you are deeply, deeply human. If you felt held by this story, I invite you to leave a comment below. Tell me what spoke to you, or simply say "me too." Your voice might be the permission someone else needs to speak. And if you'd like to keep walking this road with us, these quiet, honest roads of middle life, please consider subscribing to the channel. There are more stories to tell, more silences to fill, more women to remind that they matter. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself. We'll be here when you're ready to return.